Hello, Florence, my lovely. Are we ready to continue? Felicity has just scared and surprised her two sisters, right? They're down in the basement looking at all those gravestones. What are you doing here? Hissed Shenanigan. Felicity scowled. What am I doing here? I was up late sewing. She gave Shenanigan an especially vicious glare. When I heard someone galumphing around down here, I thought it might be burglars. We weren't galumphing. And what would you have done if we were burglars? I'd have asked them if they fancied being kidnappers instead and pointed them toward your room. Shenanigan had learned a new word recently, which was incandescent. It meant both brightly lit, and like a candle, but also furious. With her torch angled up to her chin and her anger making her glow from inside, Felicity was most definitely incandescent. Phenomena stepped between them. This is pointless. Felicity, are you staying or going? Well, knowing you two, you'll knock over a shelf and get crushed under a pile of rubble, snapped Felicity. So I actually wouldn't enjoy that very much, even though you deserve it. You're my sisters. Now move out of the way. Before her sisters had come along, baby Felicity had little to do except crawl around the hedge maze in the garden. She'd grown quite adept at labyrinths, and now found her way through the shelves with ease. Shenanigan and Phenomena followed close behind her, and the darkness brought up the rear. After a while, Felicity said, "Look, there's S. Give me a hand." And with an effort, the three of them turned Shenanigan's gravestone to face them. They crowded round to read it. It said, Shenanigan Swift. Noun. 1. Tomfoolery, skullduggery, mischief of all varieties. 2. A devious trick for an underhanded purpose. Shenanigan chewed her lip. Well, said Felicity. That's me, all right, said Shenanigan miserably. I don't know some of these words, but I can see mischief in there, and I know what that means, and I'm definitely it. So, why don't you look pleased? Asked Felicity. Phenomena started explaining to Felicity all about nature versus nurture and predetermination and a lot of other complicated things. But Shenanigan had stopped listening. She was staring at the slab of granite with her name on it. For many people, looking at your own name on a gravestone would be a sad or a frightening experience. But for Shenanigan, who had been rehearsing for her aunt's funeral for years, it was just like looking at a jumper she hadn't quite grown into yet. Jumper in England means sweater, right? Her finger traced the neat curved S. According to this, she would be setting traps and causing bother forever. Even if she liked her name, which she did, and even if it suited her, which it had, she would have preferred to have been consulted before she was stuck with it for life. Shenanigan was feeling a lot of complicated things and not enjoying it very much. I've got an idea, she said. Phenomena and Felicity stopped whispering. An idea from Shenanigan was a dangerous thing. We're going to need some rope, a skateboard, some matches, and some of Phenomena's chemicals, said Shenanigan. Felicity, help me lift this down. Absolutely not, Shenanigan sighed. Felicity, don't be a wet sandwich. You're not going to blow it up or whatever it is you're thinking of doing. You'll get us all in trouble. And anyway, I'm still cross with you. Well, if you're not going to help, you can go, said Shenanigan haughtily. She started to pull at the stone. It made a grinding noise as it began to slip slowly towards her. Phenomena, get ready to pick it up with me. All right, said Phenomena uneasily. Shenanigan, you're not strong enough, and Phenomena definitely isn't strong enough. Fine, I'll do it alone then. Shenanigan snapped. She braced her foot against a lower shelf and pulled again, grunting with the effort. The shelf wobbled slightly. Felicity's eyes widened. She grabbed her sister's shoulder. Will you stop? You're going to hurt yourself. Shenanigan shook off her hand. Well, then you can say I told you so. Won't that be? With a final tug, Shenanigan managed to pull the stone over the lip of the shelf. As soon as its weight settled against her, she realized her mistake. It was far too heavy. It tipped in her hands, her name falling towards her face, and Felicity shrieked, and Shenanigan twisted out of the way just in time as the stone crashed to the floor and cracked neatly in two. For a moment, they all stood stock still. Shenanigan strained her ears, listening for movement from within the house. Just as she'd begun to relax, she heard a creak and then a muffled thump of two legs and a walking stick making their way across the corridor from above them. Oh, great job, Felicity. You can't blame me for... Oh, never mind. Felicity bit back a rude word. Do what you want, but I'm not getting caught down here. And she ran off into the dark. Shenanigan and Phenomena were forced to go after her at a dead sprint or stay lost in the shelves. They followed Felicity's swinging ponytail through the looming stacks of stone to the cellar steps and up them and out. Panting, Shenanigan closed and locked the door behind her. If she could manage to replace the keys before Aunt Schadenfreude noticed they were missing, and if Felicity didn't tell, their aunt would never know. Aunt Schadenfreude's study was on the second floor, at the far end of the east corridor. By the sound of it, she was making her way down to the first floor. Shenanigan hauled Phenomena across the hall, up the grand staircase, along the west corridor to the right, and up the second set of stairs to the second floor, just as Aunt Schadenfreude's walking stick began to thump ominously down the grand staircase. It was a close thing. They heaved ragged sighs of relief and separated. Phenomena headed to her lab on unsteady legs. Shenanigan to her own room. The lights were all out, and it was difficult to see her way in the gloom, but that didn't matter. Shenanigan had lived in the house for so long that her legs knew the way on their own. She was getting along pretty well without using her eyes until all of a sudden they found something to look at. Uncle Maelstrom had once shown Shenanigan a picture of an anglerfish. An anglerfish is a creature that lives deep underwater, in the parts of the sea the sun has forgotten about. It spends its whole life in darkness and lures foolish prey by dangling a light from its forehead, right above its waiting jaws. When Shenanigan saw Aunt Inheritance floating along the corridor, a pale figure in an old-fashioned nightgown with a torch strapped to her head, torch is a flashlight, right? Her first thought was of the anglerfish. Her second thought was that whatever was in the mysterious tubes she had brought with her can't have been very heavy because she had strapped every single one of them to her back. Shenanigan watched as she passed, the sour-faced Duchess, still life of a bowl of pistachios, a study in ink, and none picking her nose, and stopped in front of the painting that looked exactly like a blank stretch of wall. She swung back the canvas. Shenanigan waited for her to take out the key for the small round keyhole, but instead Inheritance took off her spectacles. She twisted one of the arms, and it detached from the frame with a soft click. She placed the arm in the keyhole. Shenanigan heard the low grinding noise of heavy tumblers shifting in the lock. Within seconds, Aunt Inheritance had slipped inside and closed the door behind her. Let's begin chapter 6. It's called Guest Appearances. Looks like a fancy bottle of champagne and 2 glasses filled. If Shenanigan hadn't been bound by a feeble human body that needed to sleep occasionally, she would have kept watch outside the secret room all night. As it was, she nodded off inside the large vase where she was hiding and woke before dawn the next morning with a sore neck and a dead leg, still clutching Aunt Schadenfreude's keys. She heard low voices far below, Cook and her aunt at work in the kitchen, Uncle Maelstrom carrying tables into the hall. She poured herself out of the vase, limped as fast as she possibly could to Schadenfreude's empty study, and dumped the keys on the desk. Hopefully her aunt would assume that she had left them there herself. Shenanigan then sauntered back to the kitchen, making a big show of yawning and rubbing her eyes as if she just got out of bed. She was given a hasty breakfast, an ugly velvet dress, and a stern reminder the morning of the reunion was upon them. It was still dark when Shenanigan clambered to her perch on top of the roof, a grayish light seeping over the horizon as if the sky had sprung a leak. She settled into a cross-legged position with her notebook and a bag of biscuits and fumbled for her torch. There were so many ways to pass messages across a long distance without the use of a telephone. Yodeling is one. Yodelay-hee-hoo. Pigeons another. To save on throat lozenges and bird feed, Shenanigan had decided that the combination of a torch and a thorough knowledge of Morse code was the most effective means of communicating with the local postman. She began to flash the torch on and off. Every short flash was a dot, every long flash a dash. Altogether, her message looked like this: dot, 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 dash, dot, 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 dash, dot, dot, dash, 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 slash, dot, dot, dot. And this meant hellos. You see it there? Morse code. After a few seconds, several miles away in the attic room of the local post office, an answering torch flashed out. Dash, 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 dot, dash, dot, dash, dot, 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 dash, dot, dash, dash, slash, dot, 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 or mornings. This was Suleiman. He was one of the only people up as early as Shenanigan who hated being asleep at the best of times. She imagined it was like being dead, and since she intended never to die, it wasn't like she needed the practice. Every morning she would clamber onto the roof, watch the sun come up, and signal to Suleiman to ask whether or not he would make a delivery. And then here's their communication. You can see it's all in capital letters with no spaces between the words, so it's a little tricky to read. It says, "Are you feeling better?" "Yes, thank you. Did Cook get packages?" "Yes." "Put me out of a job." Shenanigan grinned. "What's for breakfast?" she asked. "Kippers." He replied. "Yuck." Shenanigan enjoyed talking to Suleiman, who sometimes painstakingly spelled out jokes, or told her about the antics of his small terrier, or asked her for help with the crossword. But it took a long time to spell things out in Morse code, and soon it was almost too late for the torches. Don't come next few days, she shone out. Family reunion. Okay, exciting. Say hi to family. Fam for me. To say hi to Fam for me. Fam for me. It's a little tricky. It was exciting, Shenanigan thought. It was really dreadfully, horribly exciting. The sky lightened further and got a bit of color in its cheeks. From her perch on the roof, lying flat with a flask of hot chocolate, Shenanigan felt like a lookout on the keep of a castle, watching enemy forces arrive. She fastened her eyes to the binoculars, and for most of the morning, all she saw were cars, modern cars, old-fashioned cars, cars that were falling to bits, two-seaters, four-seaters, stretched out many-seaters that reminded her of a bristle-toothed fish. They looped around the flat silver mirror of the lake and parked nose to tail down the gravel driveway, choking the path to the house. There were so many of them, and some had large tools strapped to the roof as if they intended to get a spot of mining in before tea. Shenanigan glanced again at the little pack she had put together for her own treasure hunt and refused to be intimidated, but she sat staring down at the skylight that led to her room for quite a while, listening to the low buzz of voices drifting up from below like Phenomena's chemicals, making her dizzy and a bit sick. She shimmied up a drain pipe and knocked on her sister's window. "Are you coming down?" she shouted through the glass. "Pardon?" Phenomena was on her bench as usual, only this time she was wearing a pair of large, fluffy earmuffs. "I said, are you coming down?" "The boiling point of sulfur is 444.6 degrees, said Phenomena too loudly, which wasn't really an answer. Shenanigan slid back down the drain pipe and looked in on Felicity, who was at her dressing table putting on makeup. Shenanigan did a very loud impression of a goose, which made her sister jump and smear a stripe of pink lipstick down the side of her face. Then she hopped back into her own room before Felicity could throw a shoe at her. Beneath her bed, the orange tail of John the cat twitched. She knew how he felt. "You stay here, John the cat," she said solemnly. "If anyone comes in, show no mercy." John blinked slowly to show he understood. He kneaded his claws into the carpet. I'm wondering how much more should we read. We'll see. The sheer size of the house, with its east and west wings, conservatory tower, and innumerable guest rooms, suddenly made sense to Shenanigan as she paused at the top of the grand staircase and looked out over the landing banister into the hall. The house had been built to be full. Now that the guests had arrived, the thick oak front doors had been propped open, and the house took great gulping breaths of people, sending them scuttling between the billiard room, the lounge, the far side of the hall, where cook had outdone herself with a magnificent buffet. Everyone was talking, laughing, drinking champagne, packed tight as sardines, and yet it didn't seem cramped. The house felt comfortable, like an old cushion that finally had enough stuffing. Yes, you can see how busy it is there. Look at this. That must be Shenanigan and Phenomena, I'm thinking. Shenanigan heard a small rustle to her left and startled as she saw, it's not Phenomena, it's somebody else, as she saw a person sitting with their legs through the banisters, drawing a lizard on their arm. They noticed Shenanigan a split second after she noticed them and froze. They were about Shenanigan's age, she guessed. She'd never seen anyone close to her own age before other than Phenomena, and Phenomena didn't count. They were wearing turned-up trousers and a bright blue and black patterned jumper that looked 3 sizes too big. Shenanigan wasn't sure if they were a girl or a boy, or if it would be rude to ask them, and if it was rude to ask, whether it would be the right kind of rude. "Hello," said Shenanigan uncertainly. "Hello," they replied. the two of them staring at each other like wary cats. I'm Shenanigan. I like your jumper, she said finally. They hesitated. I'm Earth. And thanks, I knitted it. The pattern is supposed to look like the markings on a blue poison dart frog. Neat, said Shenanigan, who had never heard neat before in her life. Who had never said neat before in her life. I read about them. They're one of the most poisonous animals in the world, aren't they? Yes. My parents are in Peru. I wanted them to send me some tadpoles so I could raise my own lethal frog army. But they said that if tadpoles were meant to fly, they'd grow into birds. And anyway, I didn't need any extra help. Earth grinned at that. Shenanigan grinned back. Was this making a friend? It wasn't something Shenanigan ever had to do before, so she had no idea how it worked. She stuck out her hand with a vague idea they were supposed to shake. Earth hesitated. Before they could take it, someone else clattered up the stairs, grimacing and munching on a bag of coffee beans. Hello, said the someone. Having a peek at the zoo? She pretended to squint through the banister as if she were looking through the bars of the cage. She had very straight black hair and severe eyebrows. She must have been at the early stages of a grown-up, as she had only the faint symptoms around her eyes. The beasts are lively today. They're pretty rude. They're my relatives, said Shenanigan. Mine too. That's why I get to be rude about them. She popped 3 beans into her mouth. Shenanigan wrinkled her nose at the strong smell of coffee. The woman looked sidelongs at her for a moment, as if it were a gesture of politeness, spat out the beans over the edge of the banister. 1, 2, 3. Whoops, I think those hit someone. She put the rest of the beans back in her handbag. I'm Flora, by the way. You two better get your name badges on. If Inheritance sees you without one, she'll blow a gasket. Oh, said Earth glumly. Is she insisting on those? Flora waved a small gold badge at the 2 children. Oh, yeah, repeatedly. You can pick them up over there, she pointed. Near the front door was a long table with a stack of papers and a large blue ledger, a row of gold badges, and Aunt Inheritance, who was flapping about and squawking at people to sign in. She looked in her element, which meant everyone else looked annoyed. This is your first reunion, right? Flora squinted at the children. They nodded. Then take my advice as a veteran of these things. Keep your heads down, trust no one, and don't play any games you don't know the rules to. That seemed a bit dramatic. But everyone here's a Swift, Shenanigan frowned. They're family. Flora squinted still further. Exactly, she said darkly. Quick, do I stink of coffee? I do, don't I? I can see it in your nose. She rummaged in her handbag, took out a tiny bottle of perfume, and spritzed herself. Then she opened a little tin and popped 3 mints in her mouth at once. That's better. Mint. No? Oh, all right. She stood up straight, cracked her knuckles, and flicked coffee grounds off her dress. Once more, onto the beach, I suppose. Shenanigan watched Flora descend the stairs, her shoulders squared as if she were going into battle. Do you know what a breach is? Oh, she said onto the breach. What a breach is? Shenanigan asked Earth. But when she turned, her new ally had vanished. Shenanigan tried to look for a face she recognized in the crotch, or failing that, part of a face. Maybe a familiar nose or chin or friendly ear or a smile she recognized as her own. Something that tied all these strangers to herself. It took her a while to pick out the leonine head of Uncle Maelstrom, glass in hand, loitering by the buffet table. He's shrunk, she thought. But no, it was just that everyone around him had grown. His suit was sharp, but it looked as if it hadn't seen the light of day since the last reunion. He laughed readily but his hands, which usually moved when he talked with a quick, sure expressiveness, continually retreated into his pockets to hide. The idea that her uncle could feel something close to what she was feeling, that her uncle, with a voice like a ship's horn through fog and a back as straight as a ship mast, brought out the brave in Shenanigan. She gave her head a quick shake, did a few jumping jacks to get her courage flowing, and followed Flora onto the breach. That was a long one. I read for 25 minutes. I'm parched. Let me take a drink. Are you enjoying it? Oh, all these weird characters. Earth. That's a strange name. We still don't know who they are, right? Girl, boy, don't know. Well, maybe we'll find out. All right, my lovely, until we read again. I love you.